What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Strange Planet Podcast. And for this week, we're going to do something a little different. Now, you know, when the awards ceremonies come around for TV and film and entertainment and stuff like that, we always do our fair share of tapping in and, you know, letting you guys know what we think, and vice versa. We'd like to know what you think as well. But for this week, we're actually going to do what we did last year, too, and that we're going to be covering the Video Game Awards, which I believe is December 12th. So there's a whole ton of, you know, different categories. I think there's at least 30 or 29 or something like that. So we ain't going to have time to really go through each one individually. So we're going to handpick probably a few, talk about the nominees, see what's up. We got a lot of views here and a lot of people here that is either owns these games or has played them or both. So I guess to tee you off and start off, the Game of the Year award. There is 6 different nominees.
Well, let's just take it from the top, actually.
Okay.
So the first one listed is AstroBot, which I know you guys don't play PlayStation. So
I know nothing about that one. I'm going to be honest.
I did see a trailer for it, so I have an idea of what it looks like. It looks interesting.
Yeah, like I have AstroBot, and it's a good game. Is it Game of the Year material? I don't know because I haven't finished it.
That's fair.
However, the gameplay is good. It's fun. It's a little bit simplistic, but it's a good like platformer in the same vein as Mario.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That way.
Really? It's like that. All right.
Yeah, so it's like PlayStation's answer to Mario. And you know, it has like a lot of like nostalgia linked to it in terms of the characters that you encounter throughout the whole game, and it makes really good use of the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller. Obviously because it was developed in-house, and so you're able to, you know, interact with the controller in ways that no other game really does on the console. And if people don't have a PS5 with a DualSense controller, think of DualSense as like, you know, the regular vibration pad, except it's a lot more intense in terms of sort of fine-tuning how it feels. So like things, instead of just like shaking, it can like pinpoint like specific areas, and it's a different sensation, and it can make you feel different sensations. So like even the triggers have like trigger locks, so you could feel, you know, resistance as you try to pull the trigger.
No shit, dude. Really?
Yeah, so if you're like in AstroBot or another game, you're trying to pull something, you actually feel that resistance to, you know, you pulling on the trigger. So it's a really great showcase for the PlayStation 5. And, you know, I can see why it's up there for Game of the Year, but I don't know that it should win.
You don't think it's going to make it, do you?
It could.
I mean, judging by some of the other candidates here, I don't know.
It's not my favorite, which we'll get to.
Since the second one is Balatro, that's the game I'm more familiar with.
Right.
I will also say this one is probably not going to make Game of the Year. It is a very interesting game, though. It's a play on poker where your hand is worth a certain amount of chips, but there's so many different things you can do to the cards.
So it's a
the
card
basis,
game.
Sort of.
Yeah.
It starts out with, you know, you come into an area, you're facing kind of a boss. You have to make a certain amount of points to beat said boss.
Okay.
So you play hands, and based on the type of hand, the value of that will go up. But it starts getting to things like after every round, you can buy cards, whether it's more cards for your deck, stuff to enhance your cards in your deck, or jokers, which is the biggest play of the entire game, because jokers have powers where they multiply your points or multiply your chips, or
Okay.
you can play certain types of cards to get bonuses, and that's the whole point of the game. Because every new game you play in succession, the points get higher and higher and higher and higher. You reach a certain threshold, and then the game sort of ends. You've beaten the level, but you can continue on further past that just to keep seeing how far the hand would go, which is
Okay.
pretty cool. I mean, and as you play the game, you get different decks, which have different types of cards in them. Or there's one deck that has only two suits, one red, one black. And that plays into other jokers that will bonus only red or only black. So if you have a four, deck, it's hard to get flushes, but in that deck it'd be easy to get flushes because it's only spades and hearts or whatever.
All right.
I mean, again, it's a cool game based on poker. If you like playing poker, it's a nice way to kind of change the way you look at that, because in every game you have a certain amount of hands you can take cards out of or play. So
All right. Now,
yeah,
let me
it's a
ask
little
you
of that,
this
but
then.
definitely, I don't think I'm going to be Game of the Year one.
You don't think it's going to win either? From the sound of it, I think you're probably right.
I
Too.
mean, I saw the list, and the one that Brooke just talked about, and the rest down the line, it doesn't really hold a candle to them. It's a
Yeah,
cool
I
game to
kinda
play.
hear
Don't
you.
get me wrong. It's something to sit down with, waste some time, have fun with friends. But the other ones look better.
Now, let me
Fortunately.
ask you this though, pertaining to that, because I'm obviously more of an outsider that hasn't played it really. I've seen it before, but I never really played it. But these cards that you speak of, is this
Mhm.
like a game where it's like magic in a sense, or is it literally like playing cards with jacks
No,
and
it's literally playing cards. Ace
oh no
to
shit,
king. Yep.
really?
You can get certain things that will enhance your cards, like put a red dot on it, which will have a certain effect. You make the card golden, which gives you more tokens in your when you play it.
No
You'll make cards
kidding.
glass that'll have multipliers, but it may break when it does the multiplier. And once you start playing the game, you start picking up on what the little nuances are, and it becomes very interesting.
Does it use a standard like 52 card deck? Or is it like
Mm,
blackjack where there's multiple
The
decks?
first deck you start with, yes, but
Okay.
prior decks after that, no. They'll
Interesting.
change.
All
They'll
right.
change how many cards are in there. You'll probably have more nines of hearts in one deck that you play, and each deck has different rules to kind of how it functions. So
Interesting. Yeah, that's some shit there. That's
yeah,
for sure.
it's
And it's
definitely
something different. That's what I think is also not
exactly. It's
bad about
something
it.
different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something new, It's not like the same old two steps. Not many games like that.
Mm.
So I can see why it's there, but like you said, judging by what's coming up here, I don't know if it's going to take these guys, but
It has a ceiling that it just doesn't pass. You know what I mean?
you know, yeah, I hear that. I guess the next runner-up is called Black Myth Wukong.
All
Now,
right.
Brooke,
So,
that's you.
Black Myth Wukong. I have to confess that I only picked up this game on Thanksgiving Day before I went to see family for dinner. And so I played about an hour of it. But from what I played, I was definitely blown away. I had seen previews before and I was anticipating the game, but I somehow missed the launch. Like I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a game that's going to come out in the future at some point." And I never actually heard of the release date or anything, which is weird because I check release dates for games constantly.
Hmm.
So somehow this, flew over my radar.
Is it
But
Snuck through the cracks.
is it like a Dynasty Warriors kind of a game,
Or is
or
it like
no,
Sekiro?
not it's kind of more like a Sekiro or Dark Souls, but it's less difficult, at least so far.
okay?
Um,
Interesting.
it's more actiony a little bit. But yeah, there's enemies that have patterns that you have to learn. The opening sequence is completely mind blowing in terms
Hmm.
of setting up the story
The
and the
setting and everything.
character. It almost reminds me of God of War esque, uh,
Really?
sort of, I don't
Okay.
know, like not mechanics, but more like the atmosphere, the feeling you get when you're playing that you're playing something epic.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm. All
and
right.
it really sort of sets the tone for the rest of the experience. I'm not going to spoil anything, but you really get sort of invested in the world and this character. And yeah, it's a good game so far, but I just haven't played enough of it to really
Give an in-depth
for it to,
analysis.
right, for it to be my pick for game of the year. I've been playing other games, but I'm definitely going to get back to it. Probably this weekend.
Definitely sounds like there's much potential there. That's for sure, though.
Now, is
You
the
know what I
main
mean?
character based on the Monkey King?
Yes, he's based on a Chinese
Oh,
mythic
really?
figure, and
Yeah.
Huh.
yeah,
Oh, shit.
so
Jet Li
A
has
little
played the role
mythology
in
in
movies
there, huh?
before.
yeah, and it really is an epic, at least from the beginning, an epic story, and lots of mythical creatures, and obviously the main character is a monkey, and yeah, he has to fight some shit.
Now, is that on both consoles too, or is that only PlayStation?
No, that is only on PlayStation and PC. Uh,
Interesting.
Oh
it,
well.
it it's supposed to come to Xbox actually. It was announced for it, but obviously it didn't release you know
Didn't make the cut
same
yet.
time. So Xbox is always last. It
So
didn't
it
even get it
seems
at all.
for
But
real.
it's been better for Xbox in recent times. So,
All right. I guess moving on to the next nominee here, we have. I think this is actually a very interesting one, to be honest.
yeah, it's a
Elden Ring:
controversial
Shadow
pick.
of the Erdtree. And the weird part about it is, if I'm not mistaken, this is not even a game, isn't it? More of like a expansion.
Yeah, it's a DLC for Elden Ring, which obviously is a game of the year from a preceding year.
That's got to be pretty damn
And
good, though, if that's not the main game and it's an expansion going for Game of the Year.
right, right. And
That's some
there's
shit.
there's there's a little bit of precedent for this. I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe. What game was it? It was the give me a sec.
It's coming.
Um, a, cou- damn, hold on.
I can cut this out, so it's no biggie.
Oh, yeah. All right, yeah. So a couple of years ago, The Witcher um had an expansion. There was Blood and Wine and then another one. But one of the expansions was nominated and won RPG of the year,
No shit,
even
too.
though it was just a DLC that was, maybe about 20 hours long.
That was a good
Um,
franchise, though. All of those.
yeah, but it's probably a slow year for RPGs that year, but still a DLC won RPG of
Imagine.
the year.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's pretty
but
wild there.
now we're talking about game of the year, not just RPG of the year, game
Right.
of the year.
Overall game of the
And
year. That's for
and
sure.
Elden Ring is up for uh I'm astounded. I don't doubt that it's good.
Right.
The
I
the first the main game was incredible and
yeah, like that
groundbreaking.
I know about.
Um and so will it do it again in
That's,
terms of blowing our minds, in terms of the world and the scope? Um,
that's the
you
George
know,
R. R. Martin. Didn't he have a lot to do
yeah,
with that too?
he collaborated. He designed the world. He wrote
Damn.
the backstory and all the sort of mechanics of how the world works in
Never
Elden.
mind getting that last Game of Thrones book out, buddy. But no,
Right. I mean, anything to avoid that,
yeah, right.
I mean,
Making a series of
it
games instead.
sounds like Elden Ring has a really good chance.
I think it's in the stronger top two. I think there's one
So
more coming up. I think.
Well, I mean, the other two left on this list look like real contenders too.
That's what I mean. The next ones coming up, I think, also are very likely.
I mean, I don't own this one. I've played it before. Final Fantasy VII, so the Rebirth one
Yep.
is what's a whole complete graphical remake of the whole thing, right?
okay,
And some
so
added stuff.
He's the
So
guy
hold
to
on,
talk
hold
to
on.
about that. That's for sure.
So so Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is actually the second part of a three-part remake of the original Final Fantasy VII. So
Oh,
Final,
okay.
yeah,
They took Final Fantasy and they remade it into three parts.
yeah,
They
just like they
expanded on
took
it too.
the Hobbit book and split it into three parts, three
Okay,
movies.
so this
Three
is what
movies.
this
Yeah,
is the
that's what they did
second
with
of
that.
three.
This is the second of the three.
There's one
Okay.
more coming. Yeah.
And right, and so Final Fantasy VII remake was what the first one was called. Now it's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and then the last one is Final Fantasy VII.
Goes.
Uh, fuck. Let me look it up real quick.
I mean, it definitely sounds interesting. I mean, I thought it was just like, the remake was finally out, but just to know that they changed it into three separate games.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
apparently
I
they did
feel
a
kind
lot
of
to it.
cheated. I feel kind of cheated though, because in the original Final Fantasy VII, wasn't that like a 4-disc game?
Probably a lot of those were multi discs. I know that because
Yeah,
we're also talking those are old gen consoles
yeah,
too.
but still, you have
Oh,
all of that in one game. Now you have to buy three different ones. That seems a little
what?
seems a little greedy,
Gouging.
but okay, yeah.
So,
There you
Yeah,
go.
so,
That's the word I'm looking for. Gougy.
right.
so the third one is called Final Fantasy VII Reunion.
Okay.
Okay.
Um, so Final Fantasy VII, the remakes are basically the original Final Fantasy VII story, which, yes, spanned 4 discs, I believe, on the original PlayStation. However, the first part only covers really the first 10 or so hours of the first Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
All right.
Um, and that takes place in the city of Midgar, and before you get to the open world. So the first part of the remake just really set the stage. It set up the combat system and the characters, or at least some of them. But the second part, this one that came out, Rebirth, is really the heart of the story in terms of what people remember about the original Final Fantasy VII. Now, I know that G has not played the original Final Fantasy VII,
I
so I
have
will
not.
not spoil it for him or for any of you out there that haven't played it. But definitely shit goes down in this second part.
Oh, that moment.
It is definitely, and the interesting thing about it is that, and this was sort of previewed in the first game, because you get to the end of the first game and there are some things that may or may not have changed from the original game.
Interesting. So they may
So
have switched some stuff up.
they retell the story very faithfully and expand upon it in ways that um, I think fans appreciate. There's a lot of things that you might have wanted to see or know about characters and how they live. It really sets up the world beautifully in the first game. And so when you start getting to the end, though, there are some things that happen that are very interesting in terms of what is to come and what happened and what should have happened. And certain characters may be aware of
Hmm.
things that happen that they shouldn't be. Um, so there's basically a meta story alongside the original Final Fantasy VII. So that's to entertain people who have played the original
The
game
original.
and they still
Mhm.
don't know what to expect.
Hmm.
That is some interesting shit there
And
because
so, yeah. And so the new one, uh, Reunion, I actually haven't finished it yet because I played it on the original PS5. And honestly, its performance kind of sucked. Um, so I just got the PS5 Pro maybe a couple of months ago. I got it when it came out. And wow, the performance is actually spectacular now.
Like a night and day difference.
I'm gonna be completing that game. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they both retell the story and also
What they added.
advance the meta narrative that kind of goes in a different direction. Um,
Interesting.
how they kind of work those two together.
One thing I can tell you is with that series in general, because there's so many of them, 9 times out of 10, when you ask anybody that's played a majority, or if not all of them, 7 is always the one they say is the best. I just found that
Yeah,
interesting. Well, that's
I
why I
mean,
would see why they made so many parts to that new remake, because it was probably the
Well,
most favorited, most successful one.
well,
I think part of the the hype about Seven was not just the fact that they took the narrative into a nice direction. The combat system was new and exciting at that time, something we haven't never experienced.
That's fair. That's a
The
good point.
actual live bar activating as you're sitting there, because
yeah,
if you don't hit your button to attack when you're
active
ready,
time battle. That's
yeah,
what they
exactly.
call it.
It's so that added an element that we've never seen in the games before. I mean, granted, from the very, very first game, which had no actual named heroes about it, as they got into like Japanese 6, American 3, that's when they started action characters by name, and you just don't make your own character named Rook or G or Mark or whatever the situation is. Just you had Axel and whoever the other early characters were. So, I mean, this was a very deep story. You got invested in the characters, the way the storyline would go through, what happens kind of in the middle, which is heart wrenching and is a big talking point about Final Fantasy VII even to this day. And
Yeah.
I know Rook knows exactly what I'm talking about too. It's just yeah, it's an interesting game with a lot of stuff behind it.
On a
The hype
story
from
arc.
yeah. I mean, even the newer games after 7 kind of had the same formula, but were never as captivating, which was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy VII just it's actually incredible that it was actually made because
Yeah.
originally it was going to be a Super Nintendo game, and Square
Wow.
Enix like was they always developed for Nintendo,
Yeah.
and they were planning this game, and they wanted at the time Sony uh approached Nintendo and started working with it to develop a CD drive
Which would
uh,
eventually become the
console.
PlayStation.
Yeah, so it Nintendo, kind of backed out of the deal and was like,
Well,
we don't
yeah, that
do this. We'll stick with cartridges.
they fucked up because while they were working with Sony on a CD based console, they also turned around and started working with Philips on a CD based console. And Philips came up with the CDI, and they had 3 Nintendo games on there, which are actually 4, which are the worst Nintendo games you'll ever hear of. Mario Hotel, which is just Mario going up and down elevators to close doors, and that's the whole fucking game.
I heard about
And
that.
then the unholy trinity or trilogy of Zelda games. Zelda: The Wand of Gamelon. And the other 2 I can't remember. One was you play as Zelda. 2 you play as Zelda, and 1 you play as Link. And the
Really?
controls are god awful. If you want to see anything on that, there's many videos online. You can see the horrendousness of these games. These were bad. And once Sony found out that Nintendo started getting in bed with Philips, they backed out. And they already had the technology with them, and they started making PlayStation.
And then that's
Right.
that's the birth
and
there.
and so Square, I think it was just Square at the time before they merged with Enix. They approached Sony and were like, "Oh, you have, a CD console," and that's basically how Sony became synonymous with Square Enix for a long time. They had, I mean, to this day, Final Fantasy VII Remake, that trilogy is only on
Square Enix.
PlayStation and,
Yep.
and I guess PC as well, but it's not coming to other consoles. It's not coming to Nintendo. Now, in recent years, they've started opening up and working, with Nintendo again. but it's just not the same anymore. There's not that exclusivity, and
The damage is there.
um, yeah, and so the reason that Final Fantasy VII was so groundbreaking was because this new medium allowed them to do things like have full motion video recording and actual like music rather than, the old school
Ball
um
waves and
Some
stuff,
boops.
yeah, like
right?
like you
Sine
were able
waves.
yeah, you were able to do so much more and pack so much more story and information. You didn't really have to worry about, well, obviously it took up 4 discs, but you could just like imagine the size that the cartridge would have to be at that time to
Oh
fit.
God.
Like you would have
Right?
like a Dumbo fucking cartridge. Like it just wasn't possible.
It would
Um,
make sense. Yeah.
and so Final Fantasy VII came to be because of that sort of fluke of history. And actually, interestingly enough, for those of you who know the game Xenogears,
I
originally
heard of it.
originally Xenogears was supposed to be Final Fantasy VII. That was the first
Wow.
um, story that was proposed for Final Fantasy VII. But ultimately, it was rejected for being too dark for the Final Fantasy series. So they
Wow.
developed it, as a separate game. But
Shit.
yeah, and Xenogears honestly is like one of my favorite games of all time. I think that story rivals, Final Fantasy VII. It is really, really good. And I hope they remake that someday.
It's
But
possible, I suppose.
yeah. So we have one more game on this list,
Yep.
and that is Metaphor ReFantazio. Now, if there are games like, Square Enix is a huge developer of RPGs. Some of the best RPGs like Chrono Trigger and um, Final Fantasy, obviously, Xenogears. Um, you know, and that's just scratching the surface. They are a powerhouse for RPGs. But in recent years, and Atlas is the developer of the Persona series,
Yep.
and that's become more and more popular. But it goes back into the 80s with Shin Megami Tensei, which is the series that Persona is spun off of. And so Metaphor ReFantazio is Atlas's latest title, which is not connected to either Persona or Shin Megami Tensei, but it's its own thing, but it borrows a lot of ideas from there. And it's like the evolution of the ideas developed in those series. And I haven't completed the game yet, but I love um, just the combat, the music, um,
Is
the
that a giant
characters.
mountain coming down?
Wait, what?
Is that a giant mountain coming down from the sky?
Where are
I'm
we
looking at
seeing this?
I'm looking at some of the pictures of the game, and
Oh,
it looks like the hero's on the ground
Oh,
looking up to what looks like
I,
a moon or an asteroid with a face
I,
on it.
yeah, that actually makes sense in the context of the story. I won't spoil what it is, but it's something that's a constant presence in the story.
Interesting.
Um,
I have an idea. I can tell you
and and
that.
yeah, it represents something and it changes over the course of the story.
Is it
Um,
based on your decisions or just over the course of the story?
not based on your decisions,
It's
Gotcha.
inevitable.
but yeah, it helps to tell the story, and it connects very deeply with the story. Um, so if there's anything that I don't like about the game, it's that it takes a little while to for the characters to really develop. Um, it they're not as immediately approachable and likable as say the characters in Persona 5. Like they take a while to develop their personalities. But eventually they do.
Yeah, it's like slow moving
Um,
in the beginning, but then once
right,
the car moves, then yeah, like it's a ground running.
right. And you'll see a lot of parallels with the Persona series, and the battle system sort of borrows from both Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, and it's the best version of Atlas's battle systems ever.
That's what
Um,
I've been hearing. Yeah,
and it's
like an
so
enhanced
like
version.
seamless and smooth, and you also can do like real-time combat. Um,
It's also a little tougher than those
if
too.
they're well, not tougher than Shin Megami Tensei.
Well, in Persona, probably, right?
It's probably on par with Persona. Um, some of the bosses are incredibly difficult, but because they use like this cheat mechanic where they give themselves more turns.
Oh, fun.
And all of a sudden, well, fuck, I have
Wow.
to survive so many more attacks in a row, and status ailments. So yeah,
RPGs, yeah, baby.
so you,
Right?
but the thing about that is like the game really like helps you with respect to giving you the ability to plan out how you go through a dungeon, and what equipment you bring, and all of the
Puzzles and shit.
well, no, like you can buy intel ahead of time
Oh,
that gives you, oh, you're going to be facing these type of enemies, so I need to like either
crap.
bring these weapons or equipment or not bring these because it'll piss enemies off. Like it really like helps you to strategize about how you tackle a dungeon, and you'll have to make some tough decisions.
All right, folks. And that's basically all of the nominations. Now, the question I ask is who do you think is going to win and who would you like to win? Now, they could be two different names. That's the reason why I say it like that.
Okay. Well, I kind of would want Final Fantasy to win just because of the legacy and the work they put into revising this epic game from back in or back in the day. But I have a feeling Wukong is going to win.
Really? You think Wukong's going to take it?
It's
Interesting.
because even though that the Elden Ring is in play as well, the DLC, it's kind of the same company ish, but it's giving me like God of War vibes
Hmm.
on the epic like adventure you're about to set on. It'll be difficult but rewarding, not like punishing like the Elden Rings and the Dark Souls games are. So I have a feeling that those who have finished it will be like, "Wow, this game was fucking awesome." So that's where I think it might go. I might be wrong, but
But that's your it's your take
that's my
there. So
opinion. Yeah.
that's fair. You know what I mean? What do you think, Rook?
So, um, as far as a preference, it's tough because Final Fantasy VII was not my first RPG, but the game that made RPGs my favorite genre.
Mm.
And so, the remake of this masterpiece is something that obviously is going to um, stay with me for a long time, and I have a lot of nostalgia for it. At the same time, I think that Metaphor ReFantazio is an amazing game in and of itself, and I actually hope that it wins because it will give more publicity and credence to what Atlas is doing, and in turn make Final Fantasy, or Square Enix rather, step up its game on in terms of
Competition.
how it approaches Final Fantasy. Maybe it doesn't have to stray away from turn-based combat as the modern Final Fantasies have. Maybe Final Fantasy 17 will return
Oh,
to
70.
turn-based combat after Final Fantasy 16 was basically a Devil May Cry. And don't get me wrong, it was a really good game,
But it's
but
comparable to
it and every Final Fantasy changes up its battle system. They're all different. They change up a lot of things, and they're just like a few things that make a Final Fantasy game a Final Fantasy game. But I think that by winning, Metaphor v Fantasio will force Square Enix to say, okay, wait, players actually like turn-based combat. They actually like these sort of old school mechanics, but just with a modern twist.
Right, right.
Um, and they may be more open to revisiting that in um, a modern setting. Now, do I think Black Myth Wukong has a chance? I do, because it is a more it's a less niche game than an RPG. It's probably more accessible to people that don't want to sit down and play a 100-hour RPG. But if you, I would say that it is probably not as I guess I don't know. Like I think what it does well, and all of these games do that. But I just think that Final Fantasy and Metaphor, this year belongs to one of them. And regardless of which game wins, I would be happy if either of them won. But just for strategic purposes, in terms of making Square up the ante, I want Metaphor to win.
That's fair. All right. And I guess to throw my hat in the box here, the short answer is I'm with you. I kind of want Metaphor to win. I definitely think it is now the one that I think will end up winning. Sadly, I don't know if it will. I got a big feeling Final Fantasy is going to win. Now, I kind of, like I said, I'm leaning 100% more towards Metaphor, but I have a feeling
Yeah,
Final Fantasy is going to win.
it's
But
one of the biggest games of all time.
yeah, because it's
Yeah.
because of the history, and that's what I wanted to bring up
The
next.
fact that
real
even
quick.
the fact that they've even brought it back several times shows that it's one of those games that will always endure.
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing I will tell you about all of these nominations is I think, now I could be wrong here, there's 2, 4, 6 in total, and I feel like 4 of which already have like a history or like it's a branch off in a sense. Whereas AstroBot and the other one, the card game one, what was that one
Balatro.
again? Balatro,
Balatro, yeah.
They're kind of standalone and new. There's
Well,
not right.
Black Myth Wukong is standalone and new as well.
That one is too. All right, so okay. That's why I figured. I had a feeling one of the other ones wasn't too. That's why like it'd be kind of cool to see one of them win because that's like something new and emerging. But in comparison to not only the history of the other ones,
Yeah.
but the success of the other ones, I feel like Elden Ring, Final Fantasy, and Metaphor have a bigger shot than the other three because of that. You know what I mean? People already know what they are. They know what to expect. And when it came to Final Fantasy, it was like a complete revamp and they just added so much shit and everybody loved it. Now I can't, of course, speak from experience because I didn't play it. But like I said, you know what I mean? I feel like the history is what's gonna possibly prevail in the end here. You know what I mean? So like I don't know if the card game Balatro is gonna really make it because of that.
And I
You
don't
know what I
think
mean?
so. That game, while it's fun and it's interesting and new, it has a glass ceiling that it just can't, break.
Right.
They'd have to retool the whole game to bring it to like an epic level game.
Right. They might make a sequel. You never know. Then they might try something like that.
Never know.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't think a card game is ever going to win Game of the Year.
But that's the
Yeah,
thing
you know
in
what
the
I
end.
mean?
Yeah, like a card game. I don't know if that
Even
really stands
even
a
if it
shot.
was like Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or Pokemon, the card game, and yeah, it's not coming close to Final
Yeah,
Fantasy
like it's
VII
just not gonna win.
and
Like,
an Elden Ring game. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't even think that Elden Ring is going to win because, like, you have Final Fantasy VII,
right.
you have Metaphor, and even Wukong seems
Wukong,
like
too.
a game above it. So,
Yeah,
Right.
I think a hard fourth for that one.
And
Yeah,
Elden Ring's not even it's an
It's a
expansion.
DLC.
Yeah,
That's
it's
why
not
I
even a
think
full
it'll
game,
lag.
really.
I will not be happy if it wins because a DLC should not win Game of the
No,
Year.
I don't. I agree. I agree.
I hear you. I hear you there. That makes perfect sense there. You know? So I guess there you have it, folks. those are all the nominations for the game of the year. I guess come this December 12th, we're going to find out who the real winner is going to be. But in the meantime, if you want, leave a message down below and let us know who you think is going to win. And that is all we basically got for this week, folks. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. New episodes of Strange Planet Podcasts will be on YouTube every Friday. Thanks for watching. Peace.